Okay, good morning. So some people in a few different Facebook groups have recently taken some pothos cuttings off of me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how to plant them. All right, so the basics is that this is a pothos vine, or at least part of one, and the cuttings that we take from them look sort of like this. Alright, so the most basic cutting that you can get from a pothos plant is basically this. So what you have is two segments, or two nodes. Basically, one node, the lower node here, has the leaf snipped off. So this little nub that you see there is going to basically become the root of a new vine. And this section here, I don't know if I can get my camera to focus on this, but this small section right there is going to be the new vine itself. All right. The leaf here doesn't really continue to grow. It's just sort of left on to provide a bit of light for the cutting as it grows. So talking about how to plant these, normally you would snip a 2-node segment like this, and generally you don't have to, but I usually like to let it sit overnight just so that the cut ends sort of callus over and dry. It makes it a little bit easier to plant. But anyway, 2 nodes, and an important part is you want this sort of let's see if I can focus on this, that sort of V shape there that's formed between the stem and the leaf. It's very important that is the part facing upward in your pot. All right, you don't want it down like this. Like, you don't want to see that sticking out of whatever you planted in. You want to see that facing upward. All right, so after you take your cuttings, however many you want, let me just make a few of them here just so I can explain this. So you can collect as many of these as you want that are sort of about the same size, and you basically gather them together so that the lower nodes are about on the same level, the upper nodes are about on the same level, and sort of form a bouquet with them. And then you'll take pot. The media that I have in here, I'll explain a bit more in another segment, but is basically just cocopeat, which is finely ground coconut husk, and organic compost. You can even use potting soil, about 70% coconut and maybe about 30 or even maybe 20% soil. After you've gathered your cuttings, just make a small little hole in there, just like that. And you literally just stick them in. That's it. All right, and you can fill those all around. You want basically the leaves facing outward, but you can get really as many in there as you want, as long as one node is under the soil level or under the media level to form new roots, and one node is above to form new vines. And each of these cuttings should form its own vine in the future, in however many weeks or months that takes. All right, so that's the first method. So after you fill in the center with as many cuttings like this as you like, you'll sort of tamp them down and then give them a drink of water. As for another method of doing this, take these out. So that's cuttings using 2 nodes. You can also, let me see, you can also sort of use a trick like this where you form single node cuttings. And what you'll do, you see there's only 1 node on there. All right, the rest is missing or gone. We cut off because this right here is really all you need to form a new vine. You can take these, again, let them maybe dry overnight to callus the ends over. And instead of sticking them in the center, you basically stick them facing outwards, like this, around the edge of your pot. And the advantage to this is that you can usually get more cuttings out of one vine, and you can also fit more of them in a single pot. The disadvantage is that it takes them a little bit longer to form new vines, and the survival rate is a little bit less than using two nodes. I'd say sometimes I've done this and maybe up to, 30-40% of them will not survive, but most of them will. I mean, you're never going to be able to take a cutting from a plant and have a 100% survival rate. But, and of course this is replanting cuttings in some kind of potting media. You can also grow pothos in water, in which case you'd take sort of a longer cutting with several different nodes on it, like this. So leaving leaves at the top, leaving nodes underwater, and then basically just stick this into whatever, a vase or a fish tank or anything like that. Potting them in water, they will survive, but they won't grow as proficiently as if they were potted in some kind of planting media. It's great for decoration around the house, but they won't live that long. Let me see, to show you what some of these look like. So planting them in the center, after a while you can kind of see here where cuttings have been planted in the center, and then a few weeks later they're starting to form new leaves, new vines. Ones like this, you can kind of see that one it didn't survive. It's turning a bit yellow. But yeah, after a few weeks your plant will start to look like this. This is one with cuttings placed, single node cuttings placed around the edge. You can see that they're coming in very well. Some of them, like these, did not survive. Yeah, those are coming in nicely. And then a few weeks later, you can repot them to something else, usually a larger container. After the roots begin to really develop on these, you can repot them into larger containers with thicker, chunkier bits of coconut, because that will, after the roots are established, they need a bit more oxygen, a bit more air around them. And yeah, as for watering, when the cuttings are young, I'd water maybe, I'd say every 2 or 3 days. You just want to keep the media a bit moist, but not soaking wet, because they need sort of a mix of air and water around the roots. So moist, but not, flooded. As they develop roots and get older, you can water them less and less frequently. Usually my mature plants, I only water about, say, once every 2 weeks or so. You can actually just watch when they start to physically wilt. Just give them a drink and they'll bounce back very easily. You don't have to worry about, you know, starving them or anything. I don't know if I can get the camera in here for this, but this is what sort of a larger, more mature hanging plant looks like. You can see the chunks of coconut I have in there are a little bit thicker. So something like this I would really only water about, yeah, once every 2 weeks or so. As for the amount of light, placing them in a windowsill is fine. They don't need a lot of light. As long as you keep them out of direct sunlight. They can take a little bit of strong sunlight in the morning and a bit in the afternoon, but other than that, you don't want to put them in direct sunlight. They sort of like shade or dappled sunlight. They're really good indoor plants because they don't need bright light. And let me see, I think that about wraps it up. If you have any other questions, let me know in a comment or a message. Happy gardening. So as for the potting media that I would recommend, I find it's best to use cocopeat, which is basically just finely ground coconut husk. So it's the outer shell of coconut that's been sort of pulverized and turned into a powder. And this is really good because it retains a lot of water, but is also sort of airy and breathable, because the roots of these plants will also need air. And when cuttings are fresh and young, I'd take a bit of this mixed with some organic compost, or even potting soil would work, just something with a bit of nutrients in it, because coconut husk is sort of nutritionally inert. So maybe about a 70% coconut, 30% soil or compost mix is a good potting mix for fresh cuttings. And then after mixing these, transferring the pre-mixed media to a small pot, I'd say maybe a 4-inch pot, and then getting your cuttings into it. So after your roots are a bit more established like this, you can repot the entire thing into a larger pot with thicker coconut husks. I also wanted to point out that if you give your pothos some space outside in some kind of a, this is basically just a coconut halve that I have here, these planted in, and that's attached to a tree in my front yard. And if you give them something to climb, like a post or a tree, something they can bury their roots into, they will very happily climb that. And it's great for the leaves because they get lots of nutrients from the bark that they're attached to. So yeah, they do really well outside too, at the base of a tree or hanging under one. Very happy to climb.